Yeah, thank you for this opportunity, and I'm a little bit nervous because it's my first presentation in English, so please be nice. Yeah? Thank you very much, you're very nice. Okay, so in September, got Total War Rome 2 review bombed on Steam. Thousands of negative reviews in a couple of days. The reason? Too many female generals after an update. But is the game the problem, or maybe the players? First of all, the update was released in March 2018. The problem isn't new. Second, not every faction in the game can have female leaders. And third, the chance to get a female general is 10 to 15%. This case shows us that players are uninformed and undifferentiated with their games, that games with a historical background are political, and notions of history are very regreed. It should not be important whether too many women appear in the game, but why there are so few at the time, and why is considering inaccurate. Games are products of historical culture. They shape our image of history, and they also express how we see history. Realizing this is absolutely necessary to deal with games and their contextualization in history classes for our school starting at an early point. There are other examples, like the critique of a female soldier appearing in the current Battlefield 5 trailer, or the lack of colored characters in Kingdom Come Deliverance. In order to use games in class, it is necessary to take the player's perspective, who is characterized by three aspects. The rules of a game. In order to win a game, the player must deal with his points and accept them to a certain degree, at least while playing the game. The rules generate imaginations and narratives in the mind of the player. For example, players have to swim in water or fly in the air, traders can be trade, pirates can be fight. For rules, game words represent ideas about people and events, processes and structures in past, present and future. And by the example of Total War Rome 2, the rules allow that female leaders appear. The game world, a game world in which only the rules of the game apply. Where the rules implemented in the game, Total War Rome 2 is set in ancient history, but it doesn't simulate this period. This is just a setting for the game. And third, the game itself. That is the application of the game's rules within the game world. This means how the user played and interact with the game. So we can summarize this in, first of all, the rules, what can the players do? The game world, how were the rules implemented in the game? And third, the game itself, the role of the player in the game. Yeah. For some guys like Mad Bomber, are woman soldiers everywhere. Yeah, you have to look at this picture. Are woman soldiers everywhere in ancient civilization war game not accurate? His role as manly ruler who can change his history itself is destroyed. The game doesn't work for him, he has no fun anymore. And only because he didn't know that fighting women in ancient times existed. The perspective of the players has this interdependency with the attention of the developers. The developers try to translate the events and processes of history into the game mechanics and providing gameplay. The three aspects, game rules, game world, and the game itself, are all suitable for historical analysis because game rules are based on norms and values of their time of origin. So norms and values can change over time, and it's true that the image of woman also changed. Game worlds are the result of looking at the past, present experiences and the expectations. So our view on the past, for example, are also changing. And the game itself represents the interaction of both. So video games can show us these changes. They are products of their time. For the analysis of games, just like for all media of historical learning, no guideline is required, but rather historical questions and specialist knowledge of the characteristics of the respective media. In the following, the focal points under which games can be dealt with in history lessons will be outlined. I don't see anything. Ah, great. So, personification. Personification refers to a form of type formation in which a selection of characteristics and attributes is generally attributed to a group and all of its members. Apart from such a reduction of complexity, the evaluation of a group or of its members is most important. By determining the characteristics and qualities selected for them, the interpretation or the ideology on which it is based can be made accessible. In games, personification is common and, depending on the game genre, necessary means, since individual game characters are only assigned to a certain kind of task or characteristics so that the game rules remain clear. It is more rewarding to uncover personifications where the game figures have options for action, but they are only played by the computer and become a disturbing factor for the player. This is because the group or type of person that is identified as disruptive factor eventually receives an attribution from the game makers. And for some gamers, like Mad Bomber, woman can be a disturbing factor. No matter which form of personification is looked at, the rules of the game require the development of characteristics attribution for the game figures, which can be assessed with historical sources and discussed with regard to its normative, historical, cultural, and game-immanent justification. So, for example, you can study the role of woman in ancient times represented in games like Total War Rome 2. Next is a game as historical source. Similar to films, a distinction between games that have historical theme content and games that do not. The latter of testimonies are not only their technical side, but also their game worlds and game narratives. Games can either be questioned with regard to past contemporary experiences and future expectations, or analyzed with regard to earlier historical considerations. In the case of historical games such Missile Command, yeah, that's a game, the focus lies on contemporary interpretations. Of great interest, of course, are the past expectations of the future, which can be seen from the game narration. Historical games are this product source of history of mentality. Such investigations would necessarily have to include materials on the historical context as well as on a history of origins and reception, like interviews or stuff. This is an example for an historical source, and you can also take Rome Total War 1 and 2 and compare both with each other and show how are women represented in both games. Games as propaganda. Some games propagate certain political contents. Since games are used by children and young people in particular, in Germany we are subject to intense observation by the Bundesprüfstelle, the law of the Bundesprüfstelle. This applies in particular to the field of extremism, who is simplifying and generalizing political goals as historical ideas associated with them can be promoted only particularly well in songs but also in games. Therefore, both games themselves and political and legal reactions caused by them, from calls for boycotts or legally binding prohibitions, should be discussed in class. Considering the respective games, justification for the use of reunification of historical persons, institutes, and events should be questioned, whereby it should be taken into account that their selection is mostly oriented towards the game goal. This is particularly worthwhile for history lessons, since it's easy to establish references to historical culture and to discuss public debates with the past. For example, you can discuss whether the accusations about Total War Rome 2 are a political decision. Presentations of history in games. Historical conceptions are to be understood as attempt to identify and prove a regularity through the historical events, processes, and structures depicted in games. The latter can be roughly summarized in predetermined purposes, the thought of an eternal cycle or subject of free will, to distinguish conception of time. Since games have goals and set rules, they suggest as regular, lawful course of events and processes represented by the game world. the association that games simulate basic structures of historical processes is inaccurate, since it assumes a regularity and thus in itself a certain conception of history. Games, therefore, unconsciously adopt common ideas of history or consciously decided in favor of them. In doing so, the game is primarily oriented towards the goal of the game, and set of rules is developed by the basis. So the latter in turn makes it possible to open up the notion of history and used by the game developers. After such an examination, the regularity determined on the basis of the rules found can be assigned to the past or present conception of history, and finally, the decision of the game developers for the respective conception of history can be assessed with regard to its technical and normative validity. Long sentence. So, foreign experiences and self-reflection with games. Similar to personification, games can also be examined with regard to representation of other cultures. A game that suggests that all people have the same ideals and goals at all times can be described as centric and ahistorical, but can still be used for teaching purposes. The main point here is how exactly the game characters get to be assigned to the rules and options of the game. Whether those are based on the tradition and ideas of the folk they are supposed to be represent, or they extract from the values of the developers themselves. Yeah, I think this is a good summarize. And next thing is thematising context by games. Games cannot simulate basic structures of historical processes. They cannot model historical experiences. However, games, just like literature or film, take up perpetual motives such as loyalty and betrayal or profit and loss, for example, and force gamers to find answers to these key problems. Oh, that's too much. Within the framework of a game world. Decisions of this kind do not lead to transfer into a historical figure, which is not possible anyway, because they are always the individual decisions of nowadays players. So, for example, Matt Bomber doesn't like to play games, women in games. So, but Total War Rome say you have to. That's the thing. Yeah, at the end, I can say games allow us to immerse ourselves in foreign or past times, to take on new perspectives, to confront unknown problems, and to question our own actions. They are not simulations, but interpretations of their developers. The player's perspective is extremely useful when it comes to using games meaningfully in history lessons. It allows a quick recognition of a game and teaches relevant components. These, in turn, are checked and analyzed for the intentions of the developers. The analysis is carried out with the help of the didactic methods of history teaching. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Patrick. This was a very interesting presentation and rather timely, considering the general discussion that's been going on right now in game fora. Questions? Yes. Are you ready for this? Nice.
Am I ready?
Okay. I have a quick question towards the end of your presentation.
Yeah.
You said something which I have voices screaming in my head that I should be very strongly disagreeing with.
Yeah.
But I want to get more of an explanation from you. You said that games are not simulations.
Yeah.
Now, as I said, that's something I would like to disagree with. But what is your definition of a simulation? Because maybe we just understand the term differently.
The definition of, that's a very good question. I have no clear definition for it. I always take the two words, simulation and game, to make a difference. I mean, in a simulation tries to be correct, tries to be accurate, tries to be, you simulate earthquakes or something like this, and the game doesn't want this. A game wanna make fun, so earthquakes don't make fun. You know what I mean? But I have no clear definition for that. But I know, and I think your question is very, very smart, because I know this has to be I have to work on that. But I cannot give you a clear answer at the time. So fun is, for me, the difference.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. I mean, you're basically saying that the difference is in the intention, which I suppose I'm willing to accept that, because I do think that games do go quite a long way towards simulation, but you know, the fun factor is indeed something that is different. You know, as a game designer, I know that if I'm confronted with a problem where I can choose reality or fun, I will choose fun.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I can look a game like real life, but it isn't real life. Yeah, think on the good things come to people who break clay pots. Yeah, so.